Hey there, everybody. I hope you're having a fine day in your little corner of the world. I realized that yesterday's video got cut out because when I was filming, my phone ran out of battery, so it just turned off, and then I didn't want to film another video because I think the points that I made in that video are true, and I just didn't feel like I wanted to make another video talking about the same thing. So I guess I'm going to make a part 2 about this. So I left off on becoming overly reliant on ChatGPT and how I was talking to this guy that works for Gemini. He's the manager of Gemini, the hiring manager or something like that, or the programming manager. To be honest, he just said manager of Gemini, so I don't really know his exact position, but I think he's up there because he was telling me how he started back in like 2006 and how he really admired the creators of Google and how it's all gone downhill and how Google is laying off many of their employees and da-da-da-da-da. And so anyway, going back to the conversation that we were having, the guy was telling me that yes, for those kids that are barely starting off and are at that point of developing their critical thinking skills, these AI systems are very harmful because they won't be able to develop those critical thinking skills because they'll become overly reliant on whatever ChatGPT or whatever chatbot spits out, right? And I said to him, but he said that for people that have good critical thinking skills, if you give the chatbot a specific prompt to get over a certain situation that you're in or to solve a problem, it's really good. And I said to him, my rebuttal was that I don't agree with that because even the people that have developed their critical thinking skills, even the people that have those skills, they will get atrophied if you become overly reliant on something because you're not practicing that skill. So it's like a muscle. If you don't exercise it or exert it in some way, then it'll just get flabby, right? The muscle will get flabby. So it's the same with our brain processes. They will begin to atrophy because if you don't use your brain, then how can it practice or how can it stay sharp? This is why crossword puzzles and all of those thinking puzzles that you do are so great for your brain, to exercise your brain and keep it, thinking and moving. Sudoku. There are just so many games out there, even tic-tac-toe, right? Being able to think through things and solve a problem and anticipate what the other opponent will do or something like that, And I think even for those of us that have developed those critical thinking skills, that will become atrophied because we become too reliant on these technologies. And I explained to him, I gave him the example of the GPS. Back in the day, before GPS, you had to memorize street names and know where north is and south is and east and west. You had to know your surroundings, be able to read a map, right? And now with the GPS, people have become overly reliant on the system. And most of us in the Western world don't have a good navigation system, internal navigation system, because we've become so reliant on these systems that make it so easy for us, which is convenient, but we start to lose our capabilities, right? If we don't use them. Like, it's like the you don't use it, you lose it kind of idea, right? And I mean, I'm guilty of this. I feel like my navigational skills are terrible because I rely on the GPS way too much. And I'm trying to get that back, reclaim those navigational skills, because that's how we evolved too. We have this natural internal compass. As woo-woo as that may sound, it's a bit instinctual, but those instincts start to quiet down when you start to rely on technologies that don't force you to use your instincts. Anyway, so that was a conversation I had with this guy that works at Gemini. And he didn't seem too positive about the whole situation, the whole AI situation. And then I said, well, you know what? The tables are going to turn, because right now AI is taking away white-collar jobs, such as mine. And now, more than ever, blue-collar jobs are going to be super important in society, and people are going to flock more to blue-collar jobs because there are going to be more opportunities for working with your hands and fixing things and working in construction and things like that. I said, yeah, that's true, but they're testing on robots now, and they're starting to use or create robots that can do the same tasks as a human. So going out to pick fruit, or doing construction, or building something. They're creating all of these machines, and although they aren't as advanced, they will be advanced in another 10, 15 years from now. So he was like, yeah, humans are just going to be, they're not going to exist. We're not going to exist in 2050, was his conclusion. And I mean, this is a guy that works in the AI field, right? Does this scare me? Yes and no. It scares me because, I mean, this is coming from somebody that works in that field. So he's got more intel, so to speak. And I do believe that a lot of jobs will become obsolete. But it doesn't scare me in a way, because these robots wouldn't exist without humans creating them. And I said to him, well, for example, with the example of creating a robot to go out to the fields to pick fruit, right? What if there is a terrible weather condition and it starts to rain? Or what if there's a hurricane going through and it damages the robots? What happens to the supply chain? Or I said to him, what if there's a solar flare, which has happened, right? A solar flare that shuts down the whole electrical system around the world, and now these robots can't work anymore because, a huge solar flare can shut down all of the Earth's electricity. And it's happened before. Last time it happened, I believe, was like 200-ish or 150 years ago. And it's happened. These solar flares have happened throughout history. Hence the reason why indigenous communities around the world have a similar, the stickman figure. Every single community has a version of a stickman figure because it is believed that when a solar flare occurs, there's like a kind of like the auroras, right? And it shows like a stickman figure. Look it up, stickman figure, across cultures. And so, if that happens, that was a bit of a tangent, but if that happens, what happens to the robots? How are they going to charge, right? And so they are overly reliant on human creations, and they always will be. Whereas humans, we're overly reliant on this earth. That is how we survive. I mean, if the earth gets destroyed, which I don't think we can destroy the earth. I think we can destroy ourselves, because if we deplete all of the earth's resources, how are we going to feed ourselves? Or how are we going to shelter ourselves? Or how are we going to breathe if there are no trees, right? We're affecting ourselves. We're not affecting the planet itself, because once we die, the planet will recover and it will create new life, because it seems like that's what it does. It's survived. The planet has survived so many things in its past, right? So many natural events. And so our extinction, or the extinction of the resources that it has right now, will not affect it. Maybe it will affect Mother Earth, the planet itself, for a millennia, but that's nothing, right? It will recover, is my point. But anyway, just as humans are reliant on Earth, right? Without Earth, we wouldn't be able to exist, because this planet is literally our mother. It provides everything that we need, literally everything that we need. Without it, we would not be able to survive. So just as we are reliant on this earth, robots will be reliant on humans. They are our creations, and if we can't fix them, or there's a solar flare, or there's a natural disaster, they won't be able to do much. Because yes, the ChatGPT and these chatbots and AGI, and this is what the guy explained to me, that every time you input information into AGI, this is what I understood, I should say. This may be I may have misinterpreted something, but this is what I understood when he was explaining how these chatbots work. So basically, every time you input information, or you tell it to make a connection, for example, I don't know, you just put me on the spot, but like, what should I cook for dinner with these ingredients, right? And you give it a list of ingredients, right? So ChatGPT will start thinking, and it will start making connections to everything that it gets from the internet. It will scan the whole internet cloud, and it will make connections with articles and websites that talk about those ingredients, and then it will spit out an answer, the most accurate answer it can get or it can make, right? And that's why ChatGPT and AGI and all of that is not super advanced yet, because it can't think for itself, because it can spit out something that is inaccurate, right? Just because, let's say you give it ingredients like tomatoes, help me cook dinner with these ingredients. Give me a dinner recipe. Tomatoes, cheese, lettuce, and I don't know. I was going to do something like sandwich, but that's too easy. I was going to say bread as another ingredient, but tomatoes, cheese, and eggs, for example. And it will get everything that it can find, everything in the internet that it can find with those ingredients, but sometimes it may spit out an answer that has an extra ingredient that you didn't include in your original prompt. So it may give you a recipe that has tomatoes, eggs, and cheese, but it also, in the ingredient list to make this recipe, you also have to add pepper and garlic and I don't know, some other ingredient out there, right? And so it's not accurate because it is just pulling stuff from the internet, and I talked about that yesterday. But anyway, the guy was telling me that when you give it these prompts and it starts making these connections, it's like the chatbot is creating a neural connection, just like our brains, when we learn something new, it creates a neural pathway, a neural connection. So now that AI system has that neural connection because it's made that connection, the ingredient connection of tomatoes, cheese, and what was the other ingredient I said? I can't remember, but tomatoes, cheese, and eggs. It's going to make a connection, even though it's not accurate. It's not an accurate answer that it will create. It will still make that connection to that recipe that it provided you that had those extra ingredients like pepper and garlic and onions and other stuff. And so that's why there's this risk that it can be inaccurate. Anyway, to go back to this idea of, do I think that ChatGPT is a blessing or a curse? I think it's both. I think it can help us solve many things because it can make those connections from all the publicly available information that it has, it can make those connections much quicker, right? And can formulate an answer based on all of the publicly available data that is out there. And some of those answers can be accurate or nearly accurate because it's just got so much information and it creates those pathways. Whereas a human is much slower. If we want an answer to something, we have to do so much research. Like we have to read through all these articles and read through all these books and read through all this information from experts and then come up with an answer, right? So it takes us a little more time to come up with the answer. Whereas ChatGPT, it's got all this publicly available information. It scans it, then it spits it out. It spits out an answer. So a lot of people nowadays are using it for psychological help, to understand their psyche. And I've done a little bit because I'm curious. So I've given the ChatGPT a prompt, certain limiting beliefs that I have and what it thinks I should do. And basically, it gives me a generic answer that it finds, that it pulls from the internet. Because once you start asking it more and more and more questions, you start to see that it starts to have a certain language, a similar language. Like, I I can't really explain it, but I just found that it was using a lot of psychology terms, like psychology phrases such as your feelings are valid, or this moment is sacred for you to like, you know, those generic phrases that therapists use that are probably publicly available on the internet. So it's scanning that and spitting out an answer, and that may help you get through mental blocks or limiting beliefs, because it's the information is out there, and so it's pulling that information and, you know, giving you an answer that closely solves your problem. But is it omniscient? Is ChatGPT or are these chatbots omniscient themselves? No. Do I think they will become omniscient? To be honest, no. To be honest, they wouldn't be able to work if we don't feed them prompts. Then they would not be able to work. I mean, that's just my opinion, but my opinion might change in about 2 years from now. Let's see what happens in 2027, right? Because that's when I guess it's going to get really, really crazy. So, I mean, we can make all these predictions about the future and where AI is going, and they may be right, but I feel like usually we get hit where we least expect it. And that goes for everything in life. You usually get hit. You think about all these problems and how these problems will arise, and if and when an actual problem arises in your life, you get hit where you least expect it. Or maybe you kind of imagined it, but it happens differently than what you had anticipated. And I think that's the same with AI. We don't really know where it's going. We can make all of these assumptions and all these predictions, and oh my God, it's the end of the world. And yes, the guy from Gemini made this very cynical prediction, but I mean, he doesn't know. And also another argument that I had was that just like iPhones, right? They had a moment where they were upgrading and doing all of these new advancements, and then they just kind of plateaued. And that's what I think is going to happen with ChatGPT and all these chatbots and AGI. It's going to have its booming phase where it's upgrading and creating all of these updates and all of that stuff, but then it's going to plateau, right? It's like the VR headsets, right? There was this fear that people were going to become addicted to the VR headsets, and now it's flopped. You know, and back in the day, I remember when people were afraid about you would go to the cinema, to the movies, and you would put on those 3D glasses, and that was going to be the future, and people were afraid that we were going to live a life of 3D, right? That this was just a window to what we will be able to see. And then the VR headsets came in, and there's this huge fear-mongering. I mean, the VR headsets have been around for a while, but they always seem to flop. They seem to have their booming phase, but then they flop. And I think that's what's going to happen with AGI. It's going to go up, but then there's going to be a moment where it can't really create anything innovative anymore, and it's just going to plateau and maybe even flop. We don't know. So all we can do is just hope for the best, and yeah, just keep on chilling, people. Peace and love. Bye.